Welcome back to STEMdentiy. I'm your host, Dr. Anna Hodgshire. I have a PhD in atmospheric chemistry, and I'm really excited to bring you two conversations with my former master's and PhD academic advisor, Dr. Jeff Pierce. So I'm posting these episodes in May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and these episodes are intended to be open and honest conversations around aspects that can really impact your mental health. So last week was directly on mental health and looking at Jeff's journey and a little bit of my journey as well around mental health. He grew so much, not starting kind of towards the end of when I was working with him, but then in the last few years as well. It's been an amazing change to observe. And it really does tell me that, yes, even if you are right now at this point in time, feeling stressed, overwhelmed, not sure if you've even chosen the right job, with adequate resources and time and taking care of yourself, things really can change and turn around for lots of people. So I hope you found that conversation helpful. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's there. You don't need to listen to it first. Listen to it when you're ready. Today, we're going to focus more on mentor-mentee relationships. I've been reaching out to Jeff recently for help on mentor-mentee relationships, as I've realized that, just like most things, honestly, as you change your job roles, you realize there's a whole new thing that you've never been trained for, you're not prepared for, and unfortunately, you're not just magically good at right out the gate. I was really hoping, without realizing it, that there was, a magic mentee-mentor switch where once I became a mentor, I would just be really good at it. And it turns out I'm not. I am okay, and I'm also growing, and I'm also getting better. And this does come down to one of my core values, which is growth. So even though sometimes it can be a little frustrating where I feel like, oh, I really wish I had handled that situation better, or I wish I felt like I was being more helpful, or whatever it is that I wish I felt, you know what? I'm noticing what I do feel like I can improve upon. I'm working with different people through conversations, Jeff, my therapist, other mentors, other professors, whoever it might be, in order to improve on my ability to be a better mentor. I hope you find this conversation really helpful. Let's dive in. Dr. Jeff Pierce, welcome back. So I'm really excited you're here again today. Last time we talked a lot about mental health. We really explored your journey and a little bit of my journey of, going through the process of realizing that you can work really hard until a point, and then, enough things are changing in the background that that level of work output is no longer okay for mental health, and how you worked through that and some ideas for people moving forward. And today we're going to shift topics that maybe feels a bit like a zig, but I think it's actually really highly related, which is mentor-mentee relationships. I've been thrown in the deep end on this. So I've been a mentee for a long time, probably all my life, right? Always having teachers. And I was always that kid who would go to the teacher after class or whatever to ask more questions. I've always had good relationships. I've sought out mentors. I've sought out positive mentors. I've had a lot of very positive experiences. And then as soon as I started advising grad students and then became a professor, there was this, here you are a mentor now. And so two things I've realized is that, one, your relationships with both your mentors and your mentees can actually have a huge impact on your mental health. And then the other one, which was very disappointing, although I should not have been surprised, was there is a no, I'm a mentor now switch. I think I had been secretly hoping that as soon as I became a mentor, I would just be this infinitely patient and calm person who can handle all sorts of different styles of working and communication and just roll with it. And that has absolutely not happened. I've had plenty of bumps and hiccups along the way. I'm still learning. I will probably still be learning for the rest of my life on how to be a better mentor. But I'm excited to touch base on both of these topics. Some of the things I struggle with that I think we'll talk about today in the mentor role is that I have to constantly remind myself I'm not responsible for my mentees' mood, their well-being, their success. All I'm doing is contributing and guiding and helping. But at the end of the day, it's up to them. And sometimes that can feel really hard because of course you want your mentee to be happy and enjoying what they're doing. And when you have any perception, whether you're right or wrong, that they're not enjoying it, it's really hard not to just internalize that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that so far.
Yeah, both on that and something you said earlier, but on that specifically, I definitely still feel responsible for the students' well-being, or mentees' well-being in general. And it's something like when your group is functioning well and everybody seems to be happy and growing and like developing, and it seems like they're developing into the scientists they want to be. It's something we as mentors take pride in. And so when something is not happening, and when you formerly felt proud about that, and all of a sudden it's not that anymore, it's hard to turn that switch off and realize they may have external factors that are contributing that have nothing to do with you. But it is important to remember that it's not just you, and they have to have self-drive, and there's things that could be going wrong in their lives that are external. And something you said earlier about having mostly always, like been a mentee before, and then you're thrust into the mentor role. This is for everyone I've talked to, this is really common. Like you can have many different mentors and you can have gone through different mentor-mentee styles, but the mentee in that didn't change. Maybe you've evolved some over time, but the only mentee you knew, unless you've had some mentor experience, is you. And
Yeah.
so when you become the mentor, you've seen the different mentor styles and you know the styles that worked best for you. And you're like, all right, I want to kind of be in that space. But then it's only been tested for you on this one type of mentee. And then all of a sudden you're being exposed to many different working styles, social styles, and whatnot. And then having to learn to adapt around that is really challenging. So I'm glad we're talking about that today.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that, yes, as a mentee, you see a lot of styles that work for you. And I think what I was a little like, man, I really just wish this could have been more natural for me is that I do tend to gravitate towards people who seem to be infinitely patient. And as a not patient person myself, this was very safe, very calm, very comfortable for me to be in because I could sort of, I knew that they weren't going to get upset about anything to do with me, or at least that's what it felt like. And so now as a mentor, I certainly try to be as patient as I can, but sometimes I can feel myself internally just like really scraping against something and wishing that I could have that infinite patience. So maybe that's just something that's not realistic for me, but it is just an interesting, you can know what you like, but you still can't execute it in real life kind of realization.
I wonder, I don't know if there's actually a true infinite patience, but rather, I mean, obviously some people are more naturally patient, but I do think people develop skills for how to communicate uh, things that aren't going well in their
Mm,
mentor-mentee relationship in ways that are as constructive as possible. And and I think sometimes that can, if someone's really skilled at that, it seems like they are infinitely patient, but really they are able to like they may be getting frustrated about something, but they're able to handle it in a direct and constructive way, that in kind way that tends to be effective. And so I think maybe it's yes, maybe you'll never truly become infinitely patient because that's really hard, but I'm guessing you will continue to get more and more skills of how to figure out when to start communicating on something and how and those kinds of things that you may appear to have greater patience.
yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think we don't really know what people had to do to get to where they are. A lot of my mentors are also significantly older than I am by easily 10 to 20 years. And even if 10 years doesn't sound a lot older than you are right now, that is a lot in terms of just experience and figuring yourself out. And I'm thinking about one of my current primary mentors. We travel together a lot, so we have conversations about this and that. And one day he had worked in industry for a long time, and he was talking about some of the training that he received. And he's like, one time I received it was basically just meditation training and how to just kind of hold your peace and be calm when you're really frustrated at something. And I'm really glad that I had that because man, I would have just like, yeah, I mean, he was joking obviously because I would have just like killed some of my, underlings. He didn't say underlings, but like he got a little head up for a second. I was like, oh, that's so interesting because I view him as one of these like pretty, he has a breaking point and I've seen it, but pretty patient people. And it was helpful to be like, all right, you know what? Even he had to go through his journey of really learning to, even when you're frustrated with someone else, you you just let that energy out somewhere else and you deal with the problem and not attack the person, which is obviously always the goal. So there's two parts of this topic: being a mentee and being a mentor. I think we'll probably spend more time on the being a mentor part, but let's maybe talk about being a mentee first for a bit. I've been a mentee again a lot longer than I've been a mentor, so I have a lot of thoughts. Mentor, I feel like that's like Utah pronunciation. Mentor, I don't know. Anyways,
They both sound okay to me. Yeah.
yeah, I think those OR words always confuse me how you're supposed to pronounce them. Anyways, being a mentee, I think some of the challenges I've had with being a mentee is that I want to please who I'm working with to some extent. So I can pretty easily meld myself to suit them rather than staying myself and setting boundaries. So this is something I've learned over time where it might take over a year of working with someone before I start feeling like I can start to set a little more boundaries rather than just kind of saying yes to everything, rather than just sort of quietly going off and being like, I'm confused, I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's okay. It's okay that it takes time, but I think it's good to be introspective in yourself to say, where am I just learning how to work with someone different than me, which I think is a really important and valuable skill. I think if we come in with the mindset, either as a mentee or a mentor, that how we work is the right way. And if someone isn't willing to work with us, then it's just going to not go well. I think there's compromises to be made within all relationships, but still setting some healthy boundaries, still being yourself. As I moved to a mentor and again discovered there's no magic mentor switch, I really helped me understand like mentors are people too. They get frustrated too. They probably have times where they're not comfortable or they don't really feel like they're helping, or even they would appreciate some positive feedback. I think it's actually really easy for us as mentees to forget to say anything nice. We're waiting for our mentor to compliment us and let us know that we're doing a good job, and we're not really reciprocating to be like, thank you, that was really helpful, or I understand this concept much more better than I did before, or your feedback on this paper was challenging at first, but I now see that it made the paper so much better. That kind of back and forth that I'm trying to bring into more of my relationships. And I just say out loud because I think we as mentees can forget how far that a little bit of encouragement can go, even if it is someone that you feel is confident, that is more senior. Most people like to hear a good thing about themselves.
Definitely. One thing I was reflecting on when you were talking about that, when you were talking about the time it takes for you to feel comfortable setting boundaries and advocating for things you want out of the mentor-mentee relationship, is there's very different levels of power dynamic, I think, in different mentor-mentee relationships. Like you can have, say, a mentoring program where you're assigned to a mentor who's not your graduate advisor, or not necessarily someone who's going to write you a recommendation letter. And I would guess that people feel more comfortable advocating for themselves in those relationships where there's less of a power dynamic, compared to if it's like your graduate advisor, they're the PI on the grant that's paying
Or your boss at your company,
your
perhaps
boss at your
your
company.
direct report at your
Totally.
company. Yeah.
Where there can be, a non-trivial risk of, hopefully not retaliation, but that's what we would worry about when advocating for yourself early as a mentee, or just sort of souring that relationship and those kinds of things. So I get the delay in that, and understanding, mentors and mentees need to learn how each other tick, and what are they comfortable with and not comfortable with. And so as a mentee, I can, particularly, if there's a power dynamic, I can understand there needing to be time before feeling comfortable advocating for those things.
Yeah. And I think, as we slide over to the mentor relationship, I think we'll probably be able to say some things that current mentees can take to heart of, oh, okay, we're opening the hood on being a mentor, and this is kind of what's going on underneath. And again, we are just people. Most of the time you can go talk to someone. Obviously, there's times where you are in a bad situation. You do have a truly difficult mentor, whether they're actually, I won't say that, actually it's not fair. Whether you feel like the power dynamic is being levered against you or not, there might be times where you can't really talk to someone, but is there someone else you can talk to? I think that's maybe the more positive spin on the mentee side, is that it's almost certain that you'll never have a single mentor that can give you everything you need. And then, in fact, that would probably actually be pretty unhealthy, because now you're just going to get one person's slice of the world. I'm assuming people that listen to this podcast listen to other podcasts. They read other books, right? You're not just getting all your life advice from Anna. That's a bad idea. You're getting your life advice from Anna and a bunch of other people too. And you're synthesizing what works for you. You're kicking out what does not work for you. And you're making your own path forward. And that's something I actually really love. I'm very open about this, right? I'm in therapy. I work with two different therapists. I can't remember if we explicitly said this last time, but my two different therapists have very different background training. They come to the table with different skills, different perspectives. They have different ages. One of them has almost adult, no, she does have adult children. One of them has a baby. All these different things really helps me when I go to both of them. And some weeks, if I have a big thing that's really weighing on me, I'll go to both of them, see them every other week with the same issue, so I can get different tools. I can get different ideas and perspectives. I find that really valuable. One thing that I still struggle with as a mentee, getting better at over time, is how to not defer to the most senior person in the room. And this is kind of going back to that power dynamic thing, where this happens both as a mentee and it happens as a junior faculty member or a junior person on like a work call where there's more senior people in the room, and I struggle to ask questions or put in my own input. And something I've found that has helped me feel more confident over time is actually pretty similar to something I said when I put out the episode a few weeks ago around asking questions. So I know a lot of people struggle with asking a question, whether that's in a one-on-one setting or whether that's in a larger setting, like at a conference. You know, my breaking point is always the big room where everyone in the conference is at, going up to the mic and asking a question. That's really scary for me. So the kind of first step I do when I'm feeling like I'm just not, if I feel like I just don't really belong in the room, there's a lot of senior people, I'll write the question down on my paper. And then inevitably, well over 50% of the time, someone else asks that question or makes that comment that I had written down. And then I can see, oh, okay, I did have a good idea. I had value. I didn't say it, but I had value that I could have added to this. And that kind of pumps me up the next time that I can come in and say at least one thing. So again, I maybe start off on the quiet side, but then over time can kind of grow this confidence.
Yeah, I want to comment on that, and then I actually want to go back to needing different kinds of mentors too, because I really like that. But yeah, I like this idea of noting your question and hearing other people say it. Now, as a mentor, you can help facilitate that, and I try to be conscious about this. If there's like a speaker and there's a question that either that, like, let's say the speaker is assuming that the audience has knowledge, and I know that they don't have all that knowledge and it might prevent them from understanding the rest of the talk. Either I don't understand it or maybe I understand it, but I know people in the crowd don't. I will try to ask that question so that the students or mentees feel that they aren't the only ones thinking that. Oh, the other thing, which was something we've done since you were in the group, is to help increase the mentees' confidence in getting feedback and sort of knowing that not knowing stuff is or needing improvement is normal, is giving practice talks. And I try to give practice talks when I'm giving an invited talk somewhere too, and have the group give me feedback, and just to show that the newer mentees in the group that this is normal, that even someone who's given hundreds of presentations, when they make a first draft of a presentation and practice it out loud, that there's many, many things to improve on, and to help normalize getting feedback, asking questions, giving input, so that the new students in the group, if they don't understand something when I'm giving a talk, I want them to say something, because when I go and give a talk at another university, I want the first year students to be able to understand it. So if
Yeah.
the first year students in my group don't know it, so and then it normalizes for them, hopefully speaking up and saying, advocating for things, I don't know that. Can you explain that better? So that's great. So that you're working on that. The other thing, yeah, you mentioned prior to that, needing different kinds of mentors, and that, yeah, that's something we should say kind of a couple times on this episode, is that generally, as Emily Fisher calls them, there aren't many unicorn mentors, and you shouldn't expect to
Yeah.
have unicorn mentors that can do everything. And so we have a training now in our department that Emily Fisher and Melissa Burt developed, and they probably credit other people they got ideas from, called mentor mapping. And so it's a professional development series targeted towards people who haven't done before. So first year students, new postdocs, so on, that help you map out who in your life do you get different types of support for. So there's
Mm.
your getting your work done, like your direct collaborators, the people you are sharing code with, those kinds of things. So those can be peers, those can be your advisor. They can be postdocs in your group if you're a graduate student. There's your career advancement support. So these are people who might write letters for you. They'd help you with professional development. They'll introduce you to people who you may want to work with in the future or collaborate with. And then there's the people for your well-being. So your therapists or your best friends, your partners. It could be people in the group. It could be other people in your department or whatnot that you are comfortable with when you're having a bad day. So it's important to have all of this stuff mapped out and knowing where you should be going for everything. And it's probably good that you don't have one person who's across too many of those categories without redundancy in those categories, just in case there is any sort of miscommunication or something that goes wrong with that one person. You don't want to have loss of multiple types of support.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool exercise. And I think, maybe we can pause on something we talked about before we started the episode. So a couple things. What is that it's wonderful to have this large network of people, and also a lot of people, either whether you're a student or you're a new postdoc or you're a new faculty or you're new at a company, you're new and that circle is not very big yet. So I see this a lot with people who have moved, especially with people who are international. So that kind of discomfort of like, I only have, three people I can reach out to, and how do I don't want to overburden them. So I just internalize things, and maybe you're not in a financial position that you can afford to go to therapy very often. Universities usually have free resources, but I think they're not unlimited, right? I think there's a certain number of appointments you can make a week or a month or whatever it happens to be. So that acknowledging that your circle may not be that large, especially when you're starting out, and that maybe this is just as high a priority as the things that feel like they're high priority, like learning all of the literature in your new research topic area and learning a bunch of new coding skills, is also finding people that you're very comfortable with that can help you, because that's going to really help make or break your experience where you're at. And being a new person is never fun. I hate it. I'm bad at making not bad at
Totally.
making friends. I'm just uncomfortable with it. I'm
Totally.
not a natural, extroverted type of person.
Yeah, I mean, that's when a lot of mental health challenges happen, is when you switch to move to a new place, leave your support network. You're surrounded by people you don't haven't built trust with yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, whatever support network you have from your previous, whatever it was that you can still hang on to, is really invaluable. So to nurture those relationships and make sure that you have people in your corner as you move forward. And then the other thing we touched on before we hit recording is also there can be cultural differences when it comes down to these mentor-mentee relationships, where international students coming in, I don't necessarily know what kind of background they have. And I might approach them in a sort of light but professional manner. And that may or may not be what they're expecting. And it may or may not actually jive with how they're going to comfortably work. And
Yeah,
I know you've had some
absolutely. And
experience.
yeah, so certainly being cognizant, at least going in, that there could be, if someone's coming from a different culture or different country, that there may be differences and you need to learn what they are. Certainly in some Asian cultures, there's much more of a formal respect for people who are at a more senior position. And then if they come to the United States, they may be having trouble navigating where the other students in the group are, calling the advisor by the first name and acting like they're friends, and they might not feel comfortable with that. And so, and there's, I'm sure, many, many more dimensions to it than that, for different countries and whatnot. So yeah, just being aware, talking, those kinds of things. We have cultural jamboree every year in our department now, where
Mm.
three people can come and talk about their experiences, coming from different backgrounds and both within the US and from outside the US. And there's just a lot I've learned. I think the department as a whole has learned about like when you come from this kind of culture and then all of a sudden you're in the United States or you're in graduate school, like this is what their experience of adapting was like. And for me, it's like, oh, wow, yes, I thank you for sharing that because I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice kind of open forum where it's an explicit invitation to talk about your differences because it probably doesn't feel that comfortable coming in as a new international student to just sit down with your mentor and say, week 3 of knowing them, hey, this is what I'm expecting and help me understand how this is going to go. But I think we say these things again for people listening because you actually can have these conversations. You can go to your mentor and just explain where you're coming from. And I don't really, maybe I'll get to this point someday and maybe that will be actually really healthy for my group. But right now, I'm not that comfortable kind of pushing on people when it seems like they're a bit uncomfortable and I'm not sure why. So that can lead to a little bit of buildup of tension. So the more open you're willing to be, I think on both sides is really helpful. And I think this blends nicely over to kind of the other side of the conversation. And yes, I know we were like, we're gonna talk about mentees and then mentors, and now we're kind of like mostly talking about our experience as mentors, but that's all right. So explicitly switching over to the mentor side, we've talked about this a little bit, but I know you have a lot more time as a mentor than I do. So let's dig in on more on that question of how do you work with people who have different styles than your working styles? And how do you find the right balance of encouraging and you're not smothering them, right? You're not, overly checking in, making them feel pressure. Like you have to be, making constant progress, but you're not ignoring. They don't feel like, wow, I haven't seen my advisor in 2 weeks and they don't care about my project.
Yeah, I mean that can be tricky if there's someone who's pretty different from your working style. I mean, the main thing you want to do is you want to try to start with trust. I mean, your default mode as a mentor when you have a new person joining your group is you're starting with trust and you're trusting that they are working in the best interest for the towards their graduation or whatever their goal is, as well as the project that's funding them if they're funded. And in so long as they are on some week to month to multi-month time scale showing demonstrating that they are working towards that, it's easy to maintain that trust. But certainly, like if it's someone who like doesn't want to work from the office or talk or meet very much, it may be harder to get those reminders. But I think you need to like maybe set some expectations on how frequently you want to be discussing the work, like as a mentor, like setting that, like what is the minimum amount of communication frequency that you want to set. And so having those expectations may be stated and or maybe you set weekly meetings and you're fine with the mentee canceling from time to time, but you don't want it to be like habitually happening, those kinds of things. So I think if you set your sort of minimum expectations of what you need as a mentor to make sure that they're working towards the project and graduation goals such that you can maintain your trust in them. That's important because you don't want to lose trust, and that's when you can start assuming they're not, working towards those things, even if maybe they are. So you need to get whatever your minimum is for maintaining trust.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Something that I've noticed is that I have weekly meetings with most of my students, bi-weekly with a few for different reasons. And I'm always kind of leaving with like the reach out if you have questions kind of thing. And they very rarely do. And I think part of it is completely fine because we actually have a really interesting group structure where there's a lot of research scientists, and most of my graduate students not only work with me, but they work with one of those research scientists, and they work with those research scientists a little more closely on their projects. And this, I mean, it isn't unique, right? There's plenty of groups that might have a postdoc or a research scientist that's really mentoring one or more of the group's graduate students. So I don't sweat it too much, but there are times when I'm kind of like, I wonder if they had just reached out, that something could have been resolved a lot sooner. again, I don't really want to feel like I'm bugging anyone or pressuring them to be like, what have you
Mhm.
done? But I also maybe it would be good for me to just do periodic, hey, just checking in, making sure you don't need anything from me. Our when I was with your group, it was really easy to do that because everyone was in person on the same floor. And now my group is very dispersed. I have a few people who don't even work in the city, so I almost never see them in person. Some people, come to one of my work locations. I have three work locations, so the odds of me seeing them are not always that high every week, except during our scheduled meetings. So that's something I'm coming to grapple with and figuring out. It can be annoying to be on Teams all day, so I try not to abuse it, but just that check in, touch base. And if you're listening and you, the mentee, feel like, I'm getting too much or too little communication, giving those quiet suggestions to your advisor, to your mentor of, hey, sometimes when you check in this frequently, I feel like you expect me to have a lot of work done, and that can feel like a lot of pressure. Or conversely, sometimes I don't feel very comfortable reaching out to you. Would you mind maybe just checking in with me once a week or something outside of our regular meeting? Those are maybe some things just to try, right? And, it'll grow and change as you both hopefully grow and change in your own relationship. But just trying to slightly reset those communication
Yeah,
expectations, especially if it's
even
remote.
before you said it about having your group be a bit more dispersed than my group, I was already thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, Anna's experience now is probably different. Because I feel like if you're mostly all in person and on the same location, as a mentor, you can just say hi and ask how they're doing. And it gives this
Yeah.
opportunity where they can just say, oh, I'm doing well, and that's it. Or they could be like, I'm struggling with this plot or trying to figure this out. So they could get your time then, but it doesn't feel like they need to respond with anything specifically about their work. Whereas if you call as a Teams meeting or something, there probably is a much more explicit pressure to talk about
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
So very official.
that's a
Yeah.
important distinction, and I think your situation is probably a bit more challenging in order to find that balance because you don't have that ability to just see each other, walk by each other, and have the option for the mentee to approach you without any pressure
Yeah.
that they have to.
Yeah. And maybe the mid episode lesson here is just whether you're the mentee or the mentor is just finding that comfort to very gently state a little bit of your needs, whether you're getting too much or too little, of like, I could use just a little bit more or a little bit less. And that, if your mentor or mentee completely blows up about that, then okay, take a step back, give them some space. Is this a pattern or is this one instance? Maybe they were having a horrible day and you just didn't realize it and they're externally dumping things on you. But in general, most people are going to respond with a bit of a, oh, thank you for telling me that. I didn't really
Mhm.
realize that. I will work on that moving
Yeah,
forward.
that's great. I wanted to bring up IDPs if this is okay
Oh,
for
yeah,
that.
sure.
So
I have no idea what IDPs are. Go
yeah,
for
so
it.
these are individual development plans. And so this is a great
Uh-huh.
tool both for mentees and for mentors to be on the same page, both with the current project as well as the long-term goals and growth professionally of the mentee. And so several of us in the atmospheric science department at Colorado State University started developing these in the late 2010s, as we were reading about the importance of this in mentee development. And so what it is most groups will have some template as like a form that the mentee is to fill out, and it has space for them to fill out what are their short-term goals for the project they're working on, what are their goals for after this year on the project, what are their goals for professional development in the next year, and what are their long-term goals for career and professional development. And the mentee should take their time and reflect on this over, not try to rush it in 15 minutes or something, but think about it over the course of a week and be filling this out,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for those long-term goals. And then do it all on their own so they have thought through the whole process of what they want, and then send it to the advisor and then meet together to talk about it. And find that whenever we have these, it's rare that it takes less than an hour and a half to get through them because there's just so much to talk about. You can both get on the same page in terms of the project, but then as a mentor, where I find it really helpful is learning about their professional development goals and their career goals, and just kind of ending making sure that the way I'm mentoring them and the types of meetings they're going to or activities they're taking part in are actually helping to serve those things. Because I think sometimes you meet weekly with the student and you're only talking about the work they did on the project that week. And maybe you're talking about what they're going to do the next week or two, but it's really good to take a step back with these individual development plans and to talk about like the big picture and make sure that the mentees are getting what they need. And so I think through this, you end up having a lot of conversations that helps both the mentor and the mentee understand why they're working a certain way. Because like, oh yeah, your goal is this. It makes sense that you want to be doing this. You want to be like leaving campus at some point to go do this other thing because your long-term goal is
Mhm.
to become X and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
so I think that the IDPs, along with helping the mentors and mentees, work towards common goals, it helps increase that trust because you understand why the mentee is working a certain way.
Yeah, that's really cool. I actually do know what you're talking about, but I have never really formally done one. And I think that would be really helpful because I do try to check in periodically because I really care about life after grad school, for anyone that I'm working with. So I check in periodically about that, but maybe having a more formalized process will not make it feel like a surprise. I've noticed some of my students aren't very comfortable if I ask them something out of the blue. And being a scientist and an engineer, I think we have to be kind of prepared for a question that we weren't expecting, whether we're at a conference or our defense or we're, giving a report in our company, whatever. There's going to be questions you don't expect, and you do need to become more comfortable with that. But not every single question needs to be a surprise, right? So to have some structured time and some more unstructured time in my meetings, I think would help students both feel more comfortable and grow a little bit in these kind of new stretching ways. Because grad school is not like undergrad. The classes are pretty similar in my opinion, but the research part is so new and so different. And I can tell sometimes when people are a little taken aback, they're like, I didn't know this wasn't going to be a checklist like a
Totally. It's
class.
a
And I'm
tough
like, yep,
transition.
it's not a
Yeah.
checklist.
That's it. I mean, your
So it's,
timing on this is pretty
yeah.
good because I find the summer to be a good time to do it if your students are working with you in the summer or your
Mm,
mentees, because they have a little more time and maybe you do too. So I tend to in June
yeah.
maybe send it out, be like, work on this. Let's schedule a time before the end of the summer to talk about it. And then it gets to like late July and I start sending check-in emails to be like with the people who haven't done it yet to be like, don't forget, we want to
Yeah.
do this.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I will try that. And I'll probably report back on an episode because I'm always just learning something new and then being like, hey guys, this is how it
Did you
went.
do any of them with me at the end? Okay.
Nope,
I
I think
probably
so.
started
I don't
it
remember.
in like 2018 or 2019. So it may have been that you were finishing. And that's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we might have, and I just forgot, but yeah, it's not ringing too much of a bell. Um, I've talked a lot about the things that I've struggled with so far as a mentor, but I'd love to kind of turn it over to you to looking back to when you started. What were some of the things that you struggled with back then, and maybe some ways you've overcome as well
Yeah, I
as a
know.
mentor?
When you sent me this question, I wrote down a bunch of notes and I look at it now and it's a bit of a brain dump. So I'm trying to think through like how to like what to prioritize most. But one of the ones that's sort of a common theme is that my default mode is to want to be a friend
Mm,
and and if there's trust and the mentee is working towards their goals and the project goals, that works. I'd really like being around people where I can ask them about their weekend and know about their lives and have that be reciprocated. I get more fulfillment out of my job if the people that I'm around feel like we're really part of a team and we really care about each other. And
hmm
so that works great when the students are working towards their goals. Where it becomes a challenge is when it's not working or when there's some loss of trust and all of a sudden you have to flip from that to being um to giving like direct constructive feedback. And so it's important to know how to, like, if you want to live in that zone where you're a little more on the friend side, how do you switch and when to switch towards giving feedback of being like direct, like, you are not progressing towards graduation or where you're running out of funding. And I want you to be able to defend before then such that, you're not stuck without funding or having to switch to a project that is a 90-degree turn from what you were working on and those kinds of things. So knowing that, so I think if you're in this sort of like friend mode, you need to remember that you need to flip as early as possible to giving direct constructive feedback with aims that the student can achieve, such that you're not like staying there and being, oh, I don't want, they're my friend. I don't want to give them any like say anything negative or those sorts of things. Until then, at that point, it's late in the game and it's hard to course correct. It's much easier if you can be able to be comfortable giving direct, achievable feedback or as early as possible. And so one of the things I've had to learn is how to make sure I can make that jump so that you can do it early, you can do it gently and kindly still, or, just as long as it's known exactly what the student needs to do in order to achieve what the project needs, graduate on time and those sorts of things. And so that's kind of constantly working on that balance. I don't know how you, if you have thoughts on that.
No, I think that makes sense. I I think I would like to be more friendly with my group, but there's sort of both the challenge of we're all in different places. So it's rare that I get a chance to just sort of run into someone in the hall and be like, hey, how's your weekend? And then there's also just for myself, and this is my story that I'm telling myself, and maybe the story can and will change over time. But right now, I feel like I'm relatively young. I'm a woman in a male dominated field. And I feel like I need to have a little bit more professional distance or something. Most of my students are pretty close to my age. And so there's a little bit of discomfort around that kind of more
Yep.
friendly aspect because I'm not quite sure how to navigate being a friend who also needs
Yep.
to switch that off, be like, this is not going well or whatever. So it's a balance that I'm working on, and I'm sure I'll have different thoughts on over the years.
Yep.
But I do like being friendly. I don't like having just a very strictly professional relationship. Personally, I do, I've thought about recently, if I just started all of my meetings off with like an update on all of our pets, would that just make all our meetings better?
Maybe.
Maybe. So
Yeah. Yeah, I thank you for making that point. Again, that's like, something from being a middle-aged white male that I can probably, get away with being friendly and still, on average, like not worry about disrespect, as some people
mhm.
from other backgrounds and other career stages might. So yeah.
Yeah. And then again, it's a constantly shifting thing for everyone. And I expect that everyone will start off one way and then they'll find that they need to change or shift over time. Are there other shifts you've had over time for yourself
There,
or either yourself or your student successes you wanted to touch on?
one thing I've, learned is if there's a student who's struggling to make progress, sometimes it's clear that there are external factors
Mm,
in their lives that are affecting them and slowing them down. And generally in those cases, I find it relatively easy to find empathy and try to work with them. There's still obviously the cases of funding running out and those sorts of things. But in most of those cases, it's clear that they want to be making progress. And so you can lean on strategies being like, oh, do you want to track your hours? Do you want to set up a thing where you work for a specific amount of time and then it tells you to take a break?
uh-huh.
And those kinds of things. And a lot of those times where the students are struggling because of external factors, they are still wanting to be improving and they're willing to try different things to help make things work. And that's helpful. The most challenging ones is when you don't know and you can still try to suggest those things, those strategies to see if they're willing to try that, like tracking their own hours. And by tracking hours, I mean this for them.
Yeah.
I don't want to micromanage their hours from my viewpoint, but if they want to learn, that they are, only they think they're spending a certain amount of time doing X, but they're really only doing this, that sort of thing. That you could still suggest those things and whatnot, but those are the more challenging cases is when you kind of don't know, and maybe they're not sharing what the struggle for motivation is and those kinds of things, or maybe it's unclear that they want to become motivated. And those are very challenging situations that I don't know if I have a good answer to it other than suggesting those same strategies and hoping they are willing to try things.
Yeah. And we won't end on this note, but I think it is important to say at least once out loud that not all mentor-mentee relationships succeed. And it's not necessarily either one's fault. It could be, right? It could be the mentor's fault. It could be the mentee's fault. It could be it just wasn't right for external factors beyond both of your controls. And it doesn't make either of you a bad person. Again, obviously, there are explicit cases of abuse, but assuming good intent on both parties doesn't always work out, and it's all right. I've known people who have left grad school sooner than they thought, whether they didn't finish their degree or they got a master's instead of a PhD, and maybe they went somewhere else. I've known people who have left a mentor role to go into something that requires a little bit less mentoring, and it isn't necessarily just that piece, but it can be part of that piece where they just found, this just was not working for me to be constantly trying to accommodate all of these different people when maybe they were just actually really excited to do the research. And being a mentor means that you're helping other people learn how to do research, which is amazing. And it also means you have very little time yourself to do
Totally.
research, which we talked about a
Yeah.
little bit in the last call as well. But you have to kind of decide what's right for you. Looking back, do you have any final comments on what you wish either mentees or mentors knew rather?
I think on the mentee side, I think you may come in and be surprised, by the mentor style or something. But I think, like you said, like not in all cases, but in most, there's good intent and just trusting that that mentor wants you to succeed. It may be in a different way than you're used to, and maybe there's a chance at some point that you can have a discussion on, what types of adjustments might work for you, or maybe as a mentee, you end up adjusting somewhat into their style and finding that that works, and it's just you hadn't done that before. But trying to, like, as a mentee, also starting from a place of trust, just like mentors,
Mm-hmm.
we should also start from a place of trust. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one there. And then, yeah, again, as a mentor, yeah, try to also start trusting that mentees are, in academia or wherever because they want to grow and be successful in that area. And so start with that trust, with that assumption.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I like that a lot. I guess from my side, it's this us working on growth, whether you're a mentor or a mentee. Not every interaction is going to go really well, and you can either play the victim and be like, oh my gosh, my mentor is just this horrible person, or my mentee doesn't want to try. Like, you can make all the stories you want in the world, but does that actually change the situation? Does it help the situation? Almost never, right? Now you're already building up this internal resistance. So the next meeting is going to feel even stickier and stickier and stickier. Maybe a tool that I'll throw out there for people is I'm re-listening to the book Crucial Conversations. And this is a book on having more challenging conversations because, yes, ideally we all get along really well and we don't have to have moments where we say, hey, this thing that's happening is not working for me. But chances are very good you're going to have moments where either you need to have that conversation or you're going to let things build up inside of you really, really strongly. And something that Crucial Conversations, and I'll link it in the show notes. I don't remember it. It's got 4 authors, so I won't even try. But something they talk about a lot, especially near the first part of the book, is stories, right? We can assign emotions don't happen without a story. So a behavior happens and we assign a story, what we think that behavior meant. My mentor sent me an email that was short and didn't have a single explanation point. They must be mad at me, right? And now you have this emotion of whatever it is, fear, anger, confusion, when maybe you're, and maybe you're comparing to this to a pattern where usually my mentor has an explanation point somewhere and, makes me feel like this is normal communication. And I don't know, maybe they were just having a off day. It could be so many reasons why, again, this is a pretty trivial example, but why that email didn't have an explanation point in it. But that story you're telling yourself now has created this emotion. But you can change your story. You can always say, I wonder if my advisor is having an off day, or I wonder if they're driving in their car and they literally read this to their phone at a stoplight. That happens to me sometimes when I'm just trying to get
Yep.
something out really
Yep.
quickly and I can't really edit it. And I'm just like, good enough, send.
Yep.
Right. There could be so many reasons why the email came through, how it came through. And if it's really bothering you, you can always just do a quick mention of that email the other day seemed a little short. Is everything okay between us? Okay, but now you're sort of wandering into this more uncomfortable, crucial
Mhm.
conversations type territory. So this is where I would recommend the book to start building up the tools of how you have these conversations, because I'm not good at them yet, but I've become aware that I'm a very, very highly conflict averse person, and that's not healthy, right? I need to be able to manage healthy conflicts, whether it's in my personal life or my research life. So I think it's a really cool tool. And I like the stories framework. I think it's a really helpful one.
Yeah, that's a really great point that, and particularly with emails, but even in person-to-person conversations, people hear things and can interpret it many different ways.
Yeah.
And particularly when there's a loss of trust or becoming to be a loss of trust, those things, becomes easy to pick the worst possible interpretation and run with it, as opposed to trying to reminding yourself that they could have meant these other things.
Yeah. And yeah, we never know. And our story could be correct, right? But it still is cascading this negative emotion that is just making everything harder and harder. So again, a good tool. I'll try to dig into it more in some upcoming episodes because I think there's a lot of really good stories out of it. But it is free on Spotify for people who have Spotify, and I'm sure you can get it on audio books and whatever reading platform you like as well. So wrapping up the interview, I always like to ask, and I'm fairly certain we didn't do this last time, so I'll do it this time. A couple closing questions around identity, since it's STEMdentiy. What are some of your favorite shifts and updates in identity? It can be in the mentor role, the mental health space. It can be anything, but kind of in your work research life.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we didn't discuss this last time. I think one thing that's made my career a lot more fulfilling and happier is I think when I was a new professor, at least in our department, there's always an email that goes out whenever someone in the department wins some award at a like international conference or something like that. And it makes you feel like this is the norm and this is what our goal is. And so I was, on the mental health side, sometimes getting in my own head about, oh, that's all these other people are doing that, and that's not me. I'm not doing my job well enough. And so I went through a period where I worried about that, in terms of what my status was across the research field and internationally. But then as I was making myself happier, one of the changes I made is really just trying to remind myself that if I'm locally valued and contributing to things locally, that's great and that's good enough. It's probably even better. Like if I'm teaching well and I'm mentoring well and that I feel like the students are growing and they are, getting jobs in places they want to have, like that's enough. And that I should be happy with that. Like I am someone who helps people locally, and then don't even worry about, yeah, as much as you can. So, it's sometimes impossible to block that out. So I'm pretty proud.
I get kind of anxious about the awards thing too. I'm like, I've never gotten an award, but I'm like, I'm young and you never know. Maybe I'll get an award for a podcast someday, and that would be an amazing.
Yes,
That means I've
totally.
helped
Yeah.
so many people.
You
I'll take it.
yeah. I mean, that's true. You're doing this thing and you are now helping things more broadly than locally through this. So, but you found it through something you're passionate about and topics you care about and you're helping people. So, I think that is a great way for you to feel fulfillment and feel like you're making a difference without like stress of randomness of choices of who gets awards and those sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I like doing things that I have control over instead of just hoping that something falls out of the sky magically. Then
Totally.
the other flip of that question is, what is a core piece of your identity that you're still really proud that you have?
Yeah, I've always been very responsive and dependable, in terms of like responding to emails, or if I say I'm going to do something, I do something. And I remember when I became a professor, people telling me that, oh, your emails are going to start slipping. You're going to not respond to emails, and I haven't. And I think that part of it is like maybe a bit of a miswiring in my brain where an email to me is a conversation.
Mm.
But at the same time, I do feel like people have appreciated that they can come to me and that I will think about it and respond to it. And so I've learned to kind of flip it, and instead of like worrying about the fact that I'm like that, is like, okay, yeah, I'm like that. And I think you had a podcast on not letting email control you, and that is a little bit of a value of a battle for me. But at the same time, I just had to just say I can't change it at this point, and people enough people appreciate it that it's fine for me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, we've had conversations recently that have been really helpful. And I think that maybe, yeah, if we compare to the episode, I didn't necessarily say that on the emails episode, but I think where emails becomes challenging is when you sort of get in the cycle that I really fall into, which is you check your email too often, but you're not really pushing it forward. You know, it
Yeah,
sounds like you have this relationship with email where you're like, someone asked me a question, I'm going to respond to it. And that's amazing. I check my email. I read something. I'm like, oh, that's kind of scary. I don't really want to answer it right now. So I'll answer it later. And then like weeks go by and I'm like, I haven't answered the email.
yeah, yeah.
And that's where it becomes unhealthy. So I like the conversation framing. Maybe that's a good update to that whole outlook, is that some people can treat it like this, healthy conversation. Like I could name like 5 emails I owe people right now, and then I feel kind of icky about it. So it's not
Yeah,
fun. Cool. Yeah, that was awesome. I know we did this last time, so we'll do it again this time because you
yep,
and I both connected really early and on music. We spent lots of time during my time in your group talking about music. So I was thinking this morning when I was prepping for this episode, and I'm like, I want a song my song of the week that embodies Jeff. And I was like, Soulful Strut by Young Holt Unlimited. Every time I hear that song, I can just visualize you in your office. You probably still have it, the walking treadmill desk.
yep.
Yep. It's a good walking pace song. And I can literally just like see you kind of walking to it, typing along, slightly bobbing your head. I'm like, that's a good Jeff song. So Soulful
Do you
Strut.
actually remember me listening to that song, or is it just that it fits? I mean, I'm
I
sure I've
feel like
listened to it
both. Yeah, I'm sure
many
you listen
times.
to it
Yeah.
occasionally, but it's more just like it fits the vibe. Yeah.
Such a good song. And it's actually an instrumental version of Am I the Same Girl by Barbara Acklin with a
Yeah.
just recorded piano over it. But the Soulful Strut actually was a bigger hit. Yeah, I love that song. So thank you. Um, the one I picked, I didn't know that's how you were going to present it. I should have picked an Anna song in
It's
that
fine.
case.
Don't worry about
I
it.
didn't prepare. I just wanted to pick Changes Parts 1 and 2 by Neil Francis.
Okay.
He's like a modern like keyboard
I
player
know
and
Neil
singer, but
Francis.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say you probably do. He's very New Orleans sounding. He sounds a lot like Alan Toussaint, like 70s stuff. So good.
Cool. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'll just throw it out as a bonus. Third song of the week for people who are feeling real ambitious is that Jeff has this amazing t-shirt on that's Charlie and Lucy. And Charlie's asking, can I kick it? And Lucy says, yes, you can. And the
Yep.
funny part is that you had your laptop up high enough that at first I could only read the can I kick it. And I was like, well, that's a Tribe Called Quest thing. And then I was like, I can tell there's a dialogue box, and my brain was actually able to figure out it was probably a Charlie and Lucy football thing before I even saw the cartoon.
That's amazing that you figured that out. That's great. I was like so happy. I was teaching first year master students thermodynamics in the fall, and I wore this shirt, and a bunch of them were like, "Is that Tribe Called Quest?" And I'm like,
Nice.
"Yes!" Like
Youth is not
students.
lost
Yep.
musically.
Yep.
Awesome. All
Well,
right.
thank you for having me again.
Yeah, of course. I really like that conversation. I hope you found it incredibly helpful because most of us are both mentors and mentees, and that balance may shift over time. Usually, right, as you go along, you tend to become more of a mentor than a mentee. But even senior people around me, I can tell that they still have people that they go to for some additional mentoring, which I think is awesome because we're not good at everything, nor should we expect that we are good at everything. So we talked a lot about things, and I'd like to give a suggestion for this week's Learn and Move Your Feet. In other words, we heard a lot of things to process. What's maybe one small action you can put into place right now, try it out this week, And near the end, I started talking about that crucial conversations, which I'll link in the show notes, and this kind of behavior story understanding framework that I'm still thinking through. And I'm going to put out a full episode on that because I think it's actually incredibly valuable. But just to get us launched, just to get us off the ground, think about a small, like nothing crazy, it's not impacting your project's ability to get done or whatever, but a small but sticky situation you might be having with either a current mentor or mentee. Just one. And just investigate. Hey, self, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Am I telling myself, let's say that the sticky situation, I'm making this up, this doesn't happen with any of my current mentees or mentors because frankly, we don't work to the clock and it doesn't matter. But let's say that you're in a situation where it's a 9 to 5 and your mentee rolls in every day around 9:10. And that frustrates you. You're a punctual person, you work really hard to get out of the door on time, and you roll in and you are at your office, at your desk working by 9, and you're like, ugh. Why can't they work at 9:10? So what's the story you're telling yourself around them? Why are you frustrated about this? Your story might be they don't respect the company, or they don't respect me, that they need to show up on time, or they don't realize that it matters, or whatever it is. And maybe this timing thing, it actually does matter, like you're working at a consulting company. So this might not be the best example of a sticky situation, but let's say it doesn't actually matter, right? You guys don't work to the clock and your employee, your mentee tends to work until 5:10 or whatever it is to kind of make up for being slightly late. So it doesn't totally matter, right? So what's that story that you're telling yourself? And is there a way that you could alter the story that makes you feel less frustrated? Maybe the alteration to the story is, oh, that's right, they have kids and their drop-off time is 8:55 and their school is 15 minutes away. There's literally no way they can get in any earlier than 9:10. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be frustrated at my mentee at that point. I'd be like, oh, good for them dropping off their kids. I bet that's important to them. I bet that's a really nice time for their family, even though sometimes I'm sure it's stressful because obviously getting kids out the door is really stressful. All right, so let me summarize because that was kind of a long example, but learn and move your feet. Think about one small, not terribly important, but sticky situation, something that's kind of frustrating you that you might be having with a mentor or a mentee. Think about what story you're telling yourself that is leading to this frustration, this irritation, annoyance, nuisance, and consider, if it's not a big deal, could I just shift my story to something that makes me feel less annoyed? Try it out. I know this maybe sounds silly. Maybe it sounds perfectly sensible. It depends. But give it a go and see what happens. Let me know. As always, this podcast is not affiliated with my research and teaching roles at Colorado State University, but it's a part of my belief that we all should be able to have jobs we love. We do cool stuff. Let's have a cool time. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend. Be sure to catch part 1 if you didn't catch it already on mental health with Jeff Pierce. Subscribe on your podcast app, all those good things. Music by XS Sass. You can hang out with me on Instagram at STEMdentiy. I'm spending a little bit less time on Instagram nowadays, but I'm trying to be very intentional when I am on there. So if you wanted to reach out to chat or DM me, have a topic idea, I would absolutely love to hear from you. That would just make my day. So please reach out. All the links are in the show notes, and I cannot wait to talk to you next week.